this morning, all the papers, of course, full of the story that broke yesterday afternoon, which is that Peter Mandelson was arrested. People keep referring to him as Lord Mandelson. I don't think I'm going to call him that. I think that's unnecessary now, because I think we should have his lordship taken away from him. I think they're about to do that anyway. So let's just call him Peter Mandelson. We call him Peter, as Keir Starmer would say.
Or maybe we should start calling him the convict formerly known as Peter Mandelson, because I suspect, although innocent until proven guilty, of course, Mike, there is a huge case to answer here. And he wouldn't have been arrested, a bit like Andrew, if there wasn't a huge case in terms of the evidence against him. They wouldn't have just arrested him unless they had substantial
Well, I mean, they've
evidence.
certainly searched his two homes before they arrested him.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll have to say this, because you do have to say it. You're innocent until proven guilty. He was released last night around about 2 a.m. And pictures of him going home. Should we have a look at the clips, Pooch? Because we might as well see. First of all, when he was arrested yesterday afternoon, he was escorted to a police car.
That officers have arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He was arrested at an address in Camden on Monday, the 23rd of February, and has been taken to a London police station for interview. This follows search warrants at 2 addresses in the Wiltshire and Camden areas.
And that was the moment he was arrested. That broke on Sky News, and he was led outside looking very crestfallen and put to the back of a police car, which was basically an unmarked police car, and then driven out of what looked like an incredibly... And I know that area quite well, because I used to live not far from where he obviously is, right by Regent's Park there. And he was in this kind of private little enclave in this house that's said to be worth somewhere between 10 and 12 million quid, which may or may not have been bought by Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, or just from his lobbying career, of course, which seems to have been, up until a few days ago, quite illustrious.
Yes.
Global consultants, or whatever they're called. So, and obviously, as a consequence of the networking that he's done over the years. I'll tell you what was very interesting to me. I know everyone has an opinion on Peter Mandelson, and whether he's guilty or not, we'll soon find out. But also an opinion about him as an individual. Obviously, he's a man that's actually been disgraced a number of times. As we know, I think he's been expelled from government or asked to resign, shall we say?
Twice.
At least twice, maybe even 3 times.
Yeah.
But this was interesting. George Galloway.
Yeah.
I love George Galloway. Don't like his politics, but I do like his straight-talking manner. Listen to what he said yesterday about Peter Mandelson. I'd be a liar if I pretended to any feelings but elation as I watched his arrest on charges of misconduct in public office this afternoon. For me, he has been guilty of the most consistently malignant conduct in public life that I've ever witnessed. And I've been up close and personal with the chamber of horrors that is the British Parliament across 5 decades. It's pretty damning.
That is pretty damning. And I mean, it's true to say that Mandelson has been kind of, like a kind of a piece of, I don't know, cotton through a tapestry, has basically been involved with Labour since before New Labour started.
A piece of toilet paper through a U-bend, I think.
That would be another analogy that you could use, but he was involved in the setting up of the new Labour, project, if you like, with Neil Kinnock and Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson, and Gordon Brown, Alistair Campbell, and all of those people who completely changed Britain when they got elected in 1997. And then, of course, he had to resign from his job because he didn't declare a loan that he got from Geoffrey Robinson to buy a massive big house in Notting Hill. And he's had a very, very privileged and wealthy life pretty much ever since. And one of the things that was said yesterday was that just 6 months ago, there he was, lauding it up in Washington, D.C. as the ambassador to the United States of America, one of the top 6 jobs probably in British politics, making an absolute fortune and sort of sitting cheek by jowl with Donald Trump, the president.
Well, and of course, look, we all know, and it's obvious, that Keir Starmer knew all of this. He knew how maligned this man was, how corrupt, how dishonest, how unsavoury Mandelson was, and yet still decided to fast-track the vetting process and put him in place anyway. So obviously there's still questions to answer, I think, from Keir Starmer's point of view. He's definitely not off the hook as far as I'm concerned, no matter how he tries to distract by trying to throw Andrew firmly under the bus.
Right.
But I think, look, what this really epitomises for me, Mike, is this is the elite now, the kind of arrogant elite that thought that they were over and above the law. They could do exactly what they wanted. The chickens now are very much coming home to roost.
Very much so.
With him, with Andrew, and whoever else. I mean, whoever else is next.
Well, we'll come on to Andrew in a minute, but there's a spread in the Mail in which it suggests that we paid for Andrew's massages as the taxpayer, which is very nice. Ex-civil servants tell of shock at being ordered to sign off Royal's lavish expenses. Well, excuse me, I'm sorry that you were shocked at being ordered to sign off the royals' expenses, but why didn't you tell anyone how shocked you were at the time, and why didn't it make its way into the newspapers? Why wasn't somebody writing about it or reporting on it instead of just allowing it to go on?
Well, and also, of course, over the last 24 hours, the protection officers, the police themselves, the diplomatic protection squad, are in the firing line. And I kind of feel for them in a way, really, because obviously they have to exist under a kind of banner of discretion. Yeah. Of course, I get that.
Right.
But at the same time, we know that they must have seen all sorts of things.
Course
they should have sent up the line and said, look, I know we're supposed to be protecting this guy and kind of discretion, the better part of valour and all the rest of it. However, this is wrong.
Yes.
You know, whether it be what he was doing and, you know, potentially getting the taxpayer to pay for, but particularly, as it seems, his unsavoury behaviour when it comes to women and, you know, his general kind of demeanour. Yeah. So I think there's a case to answer there, really. You know, the other parts of the establishment, not just the so-called elite, that enabled this and allowed this to continue for years and years and years.
But that is the problem, and that is the problem with the establishment. I mean, the I newspaper actually does it right. Mandelson arrest sparks jeopardy for number 10, and it says arrest threatens to reignite furore over former business secretary's appointment by Keir Starmer as US ambassador, despite Mandelson's known links to the paedophile financier. You know, and again, you've got a whole cabinet full of people who advised against it. You've got practically everyone in the civil service and indeed in the security services advising against it. And yet Starmer alone decided to make that decision.
Yep.
It's nobody else's responsibility. It's his responsibility.
Yep.
He was the one that put this guy back at the centre of government. And, you know, he's got to go, surely.
Well, he has. And I've genuinely lost count of the amount of things that he should have resigned over. And also the other one, of course, that's waiting to happen is the cabinet secretary that he's just appointed, Antonia Roberta, whatever her name is.
Romeo.
Antonia Romeo. That seems to me to be another scandal in waiting. When you, again, peel away the past, the kind of alleged misgivings of others towards her conduct in the past, and the fact that, wasn't it her bullying allegations that were in a safe that the number 10 kind of bigwigs decided to break into to kind of destroy? I mean, she surely...
I mean, these were cabinet office people, basically. I mean, it happened under the Tories, funnily enough, but the people breaking in were civil servants.
Yeah.
They were the people
under
who
direction,
wanted to...
presumably.
Well, yeah, but I don't think under direction from the Labour Party, funnily enough, under direction from their own
civil servants.
Their own senior civil servants. Yeah, I think it was a kind of civil service operation, as we like, you know, rather than an actual political one.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, and also this other dirty dossier, page 2 of The Sun, Labour man sleaze claims. Sir Keir Starmer has ordered a probe into Labour Minister Josh Simons over claims he ordered a dirty dossier on British journalists. So basically what's happened is Keir Starmer has already ordered one probe, which cleared him, right? He's now decided to order another probe, which presumably will not clear him. He's asked his ethics chief, Laurie Magnus, to examine whether Mr Simons broke the ministerial code by denying claims against him. Well, of course he bloody did.
Well, but they didn't
Pretty obvious.
They did just order effectively what was the beginning or the makings of the research into a potential sleaze approach towards journalists that they didn't like, that were saying things that were perhaps not in accordance with what they would like. This was also paid for, wasn't it, by Labour Together, I think, which has an element of public funding to it. I mean, look, this is sleaze personified,
isn't it?
Of course it is. Donald Trump has talked a lot about draining the swamp. Well, I think that we should turn our attention to the swamp that exists in the UK political establishment, because there's a lot to drain, it seems.
There really is. And there's a clip we've got here, I think, from yesterday in Parliament. John Trickett, who's a Labour Party MP, who was asking questions of what's his face, the guy who is the sort of not more or less not Deputy Prime Minister, Darren Jones. Who is also up to his neck in it because he's taken money from Labour.
Starmer's right-hand man, isn't he?
He kind of is. Yeah. Let's have a look at what John Trickett had to say to him.
The House will have heard me suggest that the Minister had received a donation of almost £60,000. I withdrew that suggestion following an indication by the Minister that that wasn't correct. I've now had opportunity to look at his declaration of interests for the early months of 2004. He's received 2 donations amounting to just £60,000. I accept it wasn't in cash, so I wanted to clear what I'd said, make it clear, but on the other hand, the Minister has received a significant amount of money. I seek your guidance whether ministers who have received money need to declare their interest before responding on matters which relate to Labour Together. Maybe you haven't considered that, and you can give us guidance later, Mr Speaker.
you can whiff the smell of poison coming out of that place, can't you?
Yeah.
You know, and you know that this is going to go really, really deep into the kind of organisation of Labour's finances, because
but this is
it's all dirty money.
But it's the same. Do you remember cash for questions and cash for peerages, which I think was under the Conservatives, with a bit of Labour as well? This smacks of exactly the same thing, which is this kind of fine line insofar as it might be within the rules. Right. A bit like the MP's expenses scandal in 2009. Well, it's, it's within the
we didn't
rules.
do anything wrong.
Yeah. However, it's completely and utterly morally reprehensible.
Exactly.
I mean, effectively, this organisation, which is anarchic, a kind of a disruptor for sure, up to all sorts of no good, funding MPs that then seem to have an agenda based on Labour Together's kind of mantra, and not having to declare it in Parliament.
Yeah.
They're effectively corrupted by the fact that they're encouraged and funded by Labour Together.
And this is the other thing that nobody's really talking about. Morgan McSweeney left his job as Chief of Staff for Keir Starmer in Downing Street. But he was the guy that organised Labour Together. He was the guy that recommended Peter Mandelson and pushed for him to get the job in America.
Yeah.
You know, why is he not being quizzed by the police?
Yeah, he should be. And the other thing, of course, is the Fabian Society.
Oh, yes.
We must talk about the Fabian Society, which I think just about every Labour frontbench MP is a member of.
Yeah.
And again, probably an organisation, I would argue, that is not exactly conducive with the best interests of Britain.
No.
But no one ever talks about them or their agenda or how they are influencing and potentially corrupting MPs that form our government and therefore our legislator, and therefore how this country kind of moves forward legislatively, or rather not, as the case may be. No one's probing it.
Right.
Maybe there's a whole bunch of mainstream journalists, Mike, that are also members of said society, and that's why they don't want to expose them.
Well, there's certainly no question that there is a whole tranche of journalists who are involved in the kind of Westminster bubble and covering Westminster who, as I've said before many times, have ceased to be curious about anything and have sort of given up until it's put right in front of them.
Do you think that's just because they want access, the likes of Laura
think it is,
Kuenssberg
because,
and Beth Rigby? Because I know you had this problem because you called people out, very, very vociferously. It was then much more difficult to get a kind of, Yvette Cooper or Jonathan Reynolds or Keir Starmer.
I think we would, when I was at the old show or talk, I would get maybe one government minister per month if I was lucky.
Yeah.
You
hadn't behaved yourself.
Yeah. And but again, I don't care about that. At the end of the day, but if you're working inside Downing Street or if you're working in Westminster and you can't see and nobody will talk to you, then there's a problem.
Well, you probably also know as a journalist you're doing something right.
Yeah. I mean, the problem, I mean, it's a bit like the old, the sports scenario, because you used to have a lot of sports journalists who were very, very close to footballers or very close to managers. And so whenever the news guys would get a story about some scandal or other in football, the football reporters would normally say, oh, yeah, we knew about that. Yeah. And you go, well, why didn't you write it?
Yeah.
Well, because, I don't want to lose my contact.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of,
But that's an element of corruption, isn't it?
Yeah,
the media,
totally.
Are supposed to be holding people to account. But again, there's a two-tier journalistic approach, therefore. If I want access to someone, I'll give them a soft ride. Surely there should be, we have this whole Ofcom thing, which just irritates me beyond belief that there's an organisation, unelected and unaccountable, that seeks balance, if you like. Yeah. Yet there's people like Beth Rigby, Laura Kuenssberg, and John Sopel and Emily Maitlis and goodness knows who else, giving people a soft ride, either because of their own political conviction or simply because they want access. That's not balance, that's not fair, that's not equitable.
No, exactly right. Adam Bolton popped up again yesterday on Sky. And he's one of the few guys who, when Mandelson was appointed to be ambassador in America, came out and said what a great idea it was and what a nice man he was, and that basically he'd always been very kind to him, and that he had nothing bad to say about him whatsoever. And yesterday he was clearly a bit irritable, as it was being pointed out that, well, he's just been taken away by the police, and he's currently sitting in Chokey somewhere in North London.
Do you still support him?
And he basically he kind of reluctantly had to admit that this was not a good look for Peter Mandelson.
And the other one, of course.
But he then said, I'm not going to be dancing on anybody's grave.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really?
Okay. Well, even if he's convicted, presumably.
Well,
as
but
no
this
doubt
is
he
the
will
trouble.
be.
And of course, his partner is what's her face, Angie Ewing, who was in Tony Blair's government.
Yeah. The other one, of course, we must mention in dispatches in similar regard is Alistair Campbell.
Yes.
He was another great fan of Peter Mandelson, even though he knew he'd been kicked out of government twice and knew that there was this bad smell around him.
They were incredibly close.
Well, I haven't heard him come out now and say, actually, I was wrong, Peter Mandelson's a wrong one.
He has done a couple of podcasts with that idiot Rory Stewart, and in which they discuss Mandelson as if he's somebody they've never met.
Yes.
And they talk about him as though he's this kind of, faraway figure, as opposed to the bloke that I worked very closely with, cheek by jowl, for years and years and years inside government and outside of it.
Yeah, but these people within that elitist circle, that Westminster bubble, surely they are culpable, because if they know that someone is a wrong-un, let's just call them a wrong-un for a second, and yet they've defended them and lauded them and kind of forgiven them almost, they're enabling their behaviour.
Yeah.
You know, so whether it be the alleged giving of state secrets to Epstein, who goodness knows what he may have done with those secrets, not just maybe giving them to hedge funds, but maybe giving them to China or Russia or whatever.
Absolutely.
But also the small matter of, you know, paedophilia enablement.
Yes.
And let's not escape that for a second in terms of the seriousness of that particular
Well, we haven't even got to any of that yet because the Andrew and Mandelson investigations so far are focusing on the, you know, misconduct in public office, the leaking of documents and the giving away of information, or the selling, if you like, of information.
It's kind of where to start.
Yeah, there's so much going on
with this stuff.
But I'll tell you what, if you were the Prime Minister, what would you do if this was all going on? Have a look at where he ended up yesterday. He actually went up to Gorton, up near Manchester there, where the by-election is taking place. And, of course, he didn't actually go up to Gorton and Denton to see anybody from the public because he couldn't. He wouldn't allow himself to go out. So they basically stunted up. I mean, they must think people are really stupid, right? They stunted up a load of Labour Party apparatchiks to sit there cheering and holding banners and shaking him by the hand when most people want to punch him or at the very least trip him up or do something or throw something at him, you know. So he hasn't even got the cojones to go out and meet the public.
Well, and the left-wing commentariat were hilarious last night on X, saying, you know, this just shows how popular Keir Starmer is. And again, you know, clearly it was a staged event in terms of Labour Party members, local councillors, local activists from the Labour Party and so on. But yeah, look, he's not very good in the public eye, is he? And, you know, of course, he's not going to go and walk through a kind of the streets of the public because he knows that he is the most unpopular Prime Minister that we've ever had. You know, one Labour MP.
Well, even when he first got in and he went to somewhere like Doncaster Races and he just got abused.
He got booed.
Yeah, he got booed and he got abuse and he got called names, you know, and so we all know about the chanting.
One Labour MP said last night, well, of course, it would have needed a huge security operation to allow Keir Starmer to kind of go out and, you know, walk the streets in public. And of course, that's bunkum. It's got nothing to do with the fact that, of course, there's security involved, but there always is wherever he goes. It's the fact that he would have been booed. That would have looked awful on the media. But also, I don't think there's probably, and I don't wish the man any harm, I don't think there's any security that could kind of adequately protect him now from, you know, not necessarily violence, but from a baying mob that, you know, maybe kettle him.
Who are all chanting Keir Starmer's a wanker. Because that's what the chant goes out. You can say it. That's the chant that goes out. By the way, we've got a poll going at the moment as well. We'll do some super chats in a second. What will happen to Peter Mandelson after his arrest? He'll just get a slap on the wrist, or 1 to 3 years in the slammer, 3+ years in the slammer, or he'll become chairman of the World Economic Forum. I'm going to go with the World Economic Forum, which is 38% actually, second place. 41% of you think he'll just get a slap on the wrist. I think if he's found guilty, he's going to go to jail.
Look, I think he will, and I think if there's any political influence here, and there will be political influence, I think if Keir Starmer has any judgment at all politically, I know that's a big question mark. I know it's a big question mark.
Have you gone mad?
Yeah, I mean, someone somewhere, some advisor that they put in has got to say, hey, do you know what? It'd be quite a good look, actually, for Mandelson to be found guilty and go to prison, because it kind of cleans house. It shows that there isn't a cover-up. It shows that we are remorseful. It shows that there is kind of recompense for such bad behaviour. So I actually think Mandelson will go to prison.
Yes. Yeah, I think so as well.